Once with vaccines is, which is what I believe in, is transparency. I think we need to know exactly with all vaccines what has been the research and do they work and what's your risk.
What about polio vaccine specifically?
We didn't talk about that.
How is it that we're 1 in 34 and the rest of the developed world isn't facing those, and 1 in 22 in males? That's a real challenge. If it isn't connected to it, and if it's not connected to it, let's put it to rest. But questioning it isn't an issue. We should question science.
So far, Kennedy has not been answering reporters' questions in the hallways about a range of his views, but he is focusing on Republicans at the moment because, Dana, as you know, the math means that he needs to keep Republicans on board, meaning he cannot lose more than 3 Republican votes. And if he keeps it to 3, that'll be enough to get the job as Health and Human Services Secretary.
RFK Jr. has taken his turn in trying to convince Republican senators that hold his fate in their hands that he's not as dangerous as he is on the issue of vaccines. It starts with the false assumption that science isn't challenged and proven in order to fool people into believing the opinion of these idiots.
The most significant concern we have heard so far is from Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, himself a childhood polio survivor, raising concerns about those efforts to revoke the polio authorization. Perhaps one reason why Kennedy came out and said one thing he has been saying in the hallways, he does support the polio vaccine, perhaps to alleviate that concern from McConnell.
Weird how Kennedy's opposition to the polio vaccine vanished once he was faced with gaining the trust of Mitch McConnell, who clearly supports it. Not much of a challenge to science there, just an avoidance of rejection.
This phrase, trust the experts, it's not a thing. It certainly is not a feature of democracy. It's not a feature of science. In science, you don't trust the experts, never. And experts have their own prejudices, they have their own biases, and their own ambitions, et cetera. And so it's not, trusting the experts is not a feature of science. It's not a feature of democracy. It's a feature of religion and totalitarianism. But it's not something we do.
It's a feature of religion and totalitarianism. Without a bit of irony, these guys expect their movement full of people that trust Trump and anyone else he endorses to not connect the fact that they're blindly on board because they believe he's a Jesus figure that needs ultimate power to do whatever he wants. Scientific experts are trusted because their work is peer-reviewed to assess its validity, methodology, and conclusions. But MAGA allies' policy conclusions are based on their ambition and a desire for power that's simply condoned or rejected based on what the authoritarian leader wants. It's how we got people like former football coach turned Senator Tommy Tuberville, whose peer review starts and ends with whether or not to run the ball or pass it.
What I was excited to hear him about is get away from guessing and do facts, do science. Get behind the science and stay with it. Don't be guessing. And that's what a lot of these vaccines have done. They haven't been 100% proven. If you look at the number of vaccines these young babies get over a short period of time, it's dozens and dozens of them. And he's totally against that. He wants to make sure that parents understand the good and the bad and the ugly, instead of just forcing parents to give vaccines to their kids. But I talked about, he and I both grew up and we had 3 vaccines: tuberculosis, polio, and I think smallpox. And that's how much it's grown years. Now we get dozens and dozens. At the end of the day, he doesn't believe that we all need to be guinea pigs. That we need to find out that it actually work first, like the COVID vaccine. It was kind of hit and miss, thrown out there, and we all took it. And I think probably everybody in this group has lost somebody that they either know or friends with or family, possibly from the vaccine, that were perfectly healthy.
RFK Jr. knows that he'll land on solid ground as long as he triggers the thoughtless analysis about COVID from people like Tommy Tuberville that just toss out conclusions he pulled out from his own ass about deaths surrounding the vaccine. When he locks arms with the most dishonest and self-serving members of the Senate, it makes his job of actually proving his worth much easier. Another easy target is Senator Ron Johnson, whose fealty to Trump got him wrapped up in the scheme to pass off fake electors to nullify Trump's election loss in 2020. So to him, whatever Trump says goes.
The fact that they sabotage early treatment, truthfully, I was working with Novartis. They were all excited about trials on hydroxychloroquine. That just ended. In my conversations is just radio silence after the end of April. It's like somebody turned a switch going, we're not looking at early treatment. Then they went and sabotaged, ivermectin. You're not a horse. I mean, why did they do it? Well, if you had an effective therapy, you can't get an emergency use authorization on a vaccine. Okay, again, this was corrupt. This was sinister, and hundreds of thousands of people. Doctors have said this. I'm not a doctor. Probably lost their lives lacking early treatment. So people need to understand that. That's what we need to hold people accountable to. And we have to lay out that reality because it's an awful reality.
Sadly, we're in a time where politically advantageous stances and statements that are completely void of evidence-based thought is considered more trustworthy than adjudicated science. People in search of power and money have convinced enough people that when you hear an intelligent person provide information and take that information to a conclusion that's proven effective for decades, they must suddenly be lying. It ends with millions of people's health being negatively affected.
So Tommy Tuberville said, look, RFK Jr. and I only got 3 vaccines and we're both fine. That's called survivor bias. I mean, the notion is that we were fine, so therefore everybody else is fine. This thing about transparency is very upsetting to me because you can see all the data that everybody else sees. It's all open to the public. I mean, when we, the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, reviewed, for example, the COVID vaccines in December of 2020. We reviewed about 800 pages of data. That was all on FDA's website for anybody to look at. I don't know what Tommy Tuberville is talking about, but one thing that Tommy Tuberville said that should be a key to exactly what RFK Jr. is going to do is he said, I just talked to RFK Jr. And we talked about how do we really need all these vaccines? That tells you everything about what RFK Jr. is about to do. He is about to do everything he can to destroy the vaccine program in this country. And I think it is a dangerous time to be a child in the United States of America.